This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 40 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/myangularstory. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My Angular Story. This week we're talking to Mike Ryan. Mike, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Now, we had you on episode 137 of Adventures in Angular. We talked about NgRx. Does that sound about right?
That's correct.
Yeah, about a year ago as we record this. So, yeah. And I'm also curious, this may come out before NgConf. Are you coming out here for NgConf?
Not only am I coming out there for NgConf, I've got 3 talks at NgConf this year, all about NgRx.
Awesome. We'll put you to work then. All right. Well, it's interesting to talk to these folks that, like you, that work on things that a lot of people are using across the industry. But before we get into that, do you want to just give a brief introduction as far as, what you do for work and, why you're famous and all that good stuff?
Sure. So I am a software engineer at a company called Synapse in Huntsville, Alabama. And we're focusing on building industrial Internet of Things for big manufacturing plants in the United States.
That's cool.
And at Synapse, it's very cool work. I work as a tech lead here, so I make technical decisions around the way we build user interfaces for the industrial IoT.
That's really cool. Now I want to talk about that, but that's not what we're here for. So let's dive in and talk about how you got into programming. I like kind of getting back to that story. It seems like a lot of folks have an interesting and somewhat unique take on that. But the other thing is a lot of our listeners are new people, and it's nice for them to see, oh, Mike does, works on NgRx and he must be a genius. And then they find out that you came into the industry like everybody else and that they can contribute like you do.
Yeah. And my story is a little weird, but I think also maybe kind of typical too, as most of these stories are. So when I was a young man in the early 2000s, I grew up on the Alabama Gulf Coast, and we were really prone to hurricanes. Mm-hmm. And one year, I forget the name of the storm, but we were under threat of a pretty severe hurricane, and we had to flee our homes. And we ended up staying with an estranged great uncle in Birmingham, Alabama. This was the only time I've ever met him. I haven't really talked to him since then, though I would certainly like to thank him today. But he was a librarian for the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And he sort of saw that I had an interest in technology, but I didn't really have the resources to get into it. And after the storm passed, he sent me on my way home with the parts to build my first computer. And that was sort of like the last time I ever talked to him, but it was going home trying to build this machine that really kicked off my interest in programming and problem solving with technology.
That's awesome. I relate to that a little bit. My grandfather was sort of a mentor in that way to me. And my dad bought a computer when I was really young. But, it's really interesting just to see, there's an interest and then there's some catalyst that kicks it off. So what did you do with it once you got that computer built? I mean, what kinds of things were you doing with it from there?
So I had no idea how to build it, and it took me probably about 2 months to actually get it to boot. I remember having to sort of rely on, there was a Linux user group in Mobile, and my mother worked as a barista at a coffee shop. So she just happened to know some people from this Linux user group. So as I needed parts, she was able to connect me with people that she knew from the coffee shop to help get me pieces for this machine. The great uncle sent me on my way with a Windows 98 upgrade disk, which was not enough to actually install Windows 98 on the machine when it was up and running. So I remember the local Linux group got me a Vector Linux distro disk. I don't even know if Vector Linux is still a distro to this day, but yeah, so it's kind of like it was a multi-month process to get this thing up and running and to really reach out to the community around me to help learn how to put the thing together and get it running. And once I did, I sort of took off from there.
Nice. So you start building projects on the machine and learning Linux?
Yes. Learning Linux, and I was also donated a intro to basic programming book, like sort of how to build interactive games in a terminal with BASIC. And I started writing these interactive programs for Linux and learning different Linux distributions and just really having fun with it in my free time.
Cool. So how do you get from there to working in Angular or working in JavaScript?
Many years from that point, when I'm trying to get my way through college, I, at that point, had sort of an understanding of web technologies. And I remember thinking, I've got to pay for school somehow. Mm-hmm. So the way I decided to try and pay for it is I started building these websites for family friends or business owners. And I was doing it for pennies, basically, enough to pay for food and rent at the dorm. And that actually was enough to grow into something of a freelancing gig post-graduation. Mm-hmm. And I was focusing mostly on like HTML, CSS, jQuery. And I eventually ended up on a contract that was using AngularJS version 1.1. The project was already mostly underway in development when I jumped on it, so I had to quickly learn AngularJS version 1.1, and that light bulb sort of went off for me of, oh, this is how you build web apps, or the kinds of web apps that I was really interested in at the time, which was these really interactive, user-facing applications that can run, pretty much anywhere, on a phone, on a desktop, on a laptop, on the go. And it was kind of like a deep love at first sight of this is how to build apps going forward.
That's really cool. Now, do you want to characterize the app a little bit and tell us a little bit about why Angular appealed to you that way?
The app was a social networking app, basically, where you would have a network of friends and you could share content with each other in this group of friends. And so there was a real-time component to it, which is, if a friend did something else and you were in the app, you would get a live notification that something had happened. And so what appealed to me about AngularJS is it gave me the framework to build this kind of real-time experience, which before then, building static websites and applications with traditional back-end technologies, I didn't really know how to do or have a conceptual model on how to build an application like that. So that's what really took hold in me was this is how you can build these interactive applications that I just didn't have the skill set to build before then.
Very cool. So how did you get into doing NgRx then?
So after 3 years of doing the freelancing, I finally got my first job as a software engineer at a place called Army Game Studio, which is the United States Army's video game studio based in Huntsville, Alabama.
That sounds cool.
And it's a little atypical, but basically the Army builds educational experiences for children, for teenagers, even for adults. And these educational experiences tend to be video games. Mm-hmm. And so it's things like you might have heard of America's Army, which is a first-person shooter in the vein of Call of Duty that tries to teach you, like, in a real combat environment, this is maybe how you would triage medical conditions, or this is what real tactics looks like. So that's sort of like the main game that they're most known for. But then they'll have games like Elements, where you're learning about the periodic table and how different elements can work together to form different compounds. And so there's a wide variety of projects at Army Game Studio, and some of them were for desktop, some of them were for web, some of them were for mobile. And I was part of the web team. So we would get these sort of short-lived projects, really interactive, and we'd have to build them for the web. And AngularJS was a great fit for a lot of them.
That's awesome. Now we have to talk about building games in Angular sometime.
Definitely. I have built my fair share of games using AngularJS and even Angular. But the core thing that was similar between the contracting and Army Game Studio was, again, these are really interactive applications, usually with some live feedback to them. And as I sort of started to grow my engineering skill set at Army Game Studio, some of the common ways we were building AngularJS apps back then with a service-oriented approach really were difficult for building these live applications like at scale. If you want them to be performant and if you want to write high-quality tests for them, we ran into a lot of issues fairly frequently. And so we were looking at building projects with Angular. We sort of said at the same time, we need to think of a different architectural strategy for building these kinds of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And we built a couple of projects in a language called Elm, which is a functional reactive language. And at the core of Elm was this notion of state management.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw the same patterns that we were seeing in Elm in the React space with a library called Redux. And we're like, okay, we know what state is. State's all these things that are giving us troubles, which is things are updating live in this application and anyone can update them. And
Mm-hmm.
how do we make sense of it? And how do we test this? And how do our components react to these state changes? And what Redux was doing and what Elm was doing was really appealing because they had a solution to this problem and it was being built at the size and scale of software at Facebook and at Google. We said, okay, we know we're close to that size, so it'll probably work for the size that we're at currently. And it has a really good strategy for dealing with these kind of stateful applications. So we built Redux for Angular, which eventually turned into NgRx.
Mm-hmm.
And it was our attempt to take what was so fantastic about Redux and Elm and build out a development story for it in Angular using the Angular framework and RxJS.
That's cool. What challenges did you run into as you were building it? Because it's not a trivial problem to solve.
It is not a trivial problem to solve, and we were trying to solve this back before Angular had actually been released. We were sort of pigging off of milestones, trying to get our toes in the water of this massive change to Angular before it came out.
So you weren't just working on a new idea in Angular, but you were working against a moving target.
Definitely. We were working on NgRx months before like NgModules were even available in the framework. So the problems that we were facing back then was, man, how do we do dependency injection in this framework with like lazy loaded components? Like we were working with really hard problems back then. But it was great because we got involved with Rob Wormald really early on into the genesis of this project, and he works as a developer advocate for the Angular team.
Mm-hmm.
So as we were running into these problems, we had a really great way to have a dialogue with the Angular core team and say, hey, we're running into this, and we're actually trying to build applications in this way. And so things like NgModules happened in part because of work we were doing in NgRx. And so, yeah, it was an exciting time, the genesis of NgRx, because we got to have a lot of that conversation and impact, hopefully.
That's really great. And I love the idea that, the work that you're doing on something like NgRx, which I know a lot of people use, is something that bled into Angular and made it easier for other people to extend it and work with it and do things with it that go beyond just, building single page apps or, this or that or the other. As you get more complicated things going on, those modules come in really handy for, breaking up your functionality and understanding your code and things like that.
Absolutely. And we were just tremendously grateful that, we were just some guys from Huntsville, Alabama, and we were incredibly grateful of the Angular core team giving us the time to hear what we had to say, basically. And it really reinforced the idea for us that we can contribute or we can discuss. We shouldn't be afraid of how big we are or where we live or what projects we're working on. We have valuable things to say about the experiences we're having building with these tools. And the people building these tools are eager to hear it and to respond to it and to make improvements for you. So it's a really fun time.
I love that idea. And I love the idea of democratizing work on the ecosystem we live in. I mean, you're not exactly in Silicon Valley, right? But
not at all.
But at the same time, yeah, you reach out, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're working on. And you find that, yeah, teams like the Angular team are willing to, turn around and accommodate you to make the whole system better for everybody.
Absolutely. And That's definitely one of the highlights of the Angular community for me, is
Hmm.
just how inclusive and accepting they are of new ideas.
Yep, absolutely. I find that refreshing also in the way they approach other frameworks. They see a good idea somewhere and they're not afraid to go talk to those teams, figure out what's going on, and see how it can benefit us as well.
Right. There's always sometimes this undercurrent of opinion in the community that somehow framework developers and builders of tools are competing with each other. And this was an opportunity for me to learn that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality of it is we're all facing problems building these
Hmm.
kinds of applications, and we all just want to find solutions to make them easy to write and high quality and testable.
Yep. So, is there anything else? I don't want to pigeonhole you into NgRx. Are there other things that you've worked on or done that you're pretty proud of that you want to talk about?
Sure. So Indirects was not actually the first time I started talking with the Angular team. My first contribution with them was because we were trying to build Angular apps so early in the development of Angular. I also helped spearhead a group called the NgUpgraders,
Hmm.
which was a community team of contributors from all over the world that worked in tandem with the Angular core team to come up with strategies for migrating teams and projects from AngularJS to Angular. So some of my first contributions were actually for two projects, NgForward, which was
Hmm.
a way to write AngularJS code in the style of Angular, and then ngUpgrade, which is the de facto solution today, which is running AngularJS code and Angular code side by side. So that was my first big contribution, I think, to the Angular community, was trying to find out, okay, how can companies and teams actually migrate from AngularJS to Angular?
That's really cool. And I know a lot of teams have used those tools to upgrade their apps or are in the process of using them to upgrade their apps. And yeah, it makes it pretty seamless. I mean, I've only done it on fairly small apps, but just to be able to continue to work on my old code while I bring new features in with Angular.
Right, and that's the goal of NgUpgrade, is that you can incrementally begin to adopt Angular, and then sort of once that pendulum tilts the other way, then you can really snowball the rest of your migration.
Yep.
And that's what I appreciate about it. I mean, we have a very large application here at Synapse that is still using NgUpgrade to this day, and we would not be able to get the same kind of quality out of it if we did not have a tool like that.
Yeah. Well, it also, I mean, you are doing a rewrite when you move components and directives and other things over to Angular, but it allows you to continue to make forward progress in whatever business you're working in while you do it. And that's a pretty critical thing. I think a lot of companies have shied away from the idea of Angular just because they don't want to do a big rewrite. And this isn't a solution that will work for them, so that they don't have to do it all at once. Oh, we're going to halt producing any new features for a year so we can upgrade. It doesn't make sense.
That's right. For us, and we're a startup, we don't have the either the money or the time to say, all right, let's stop development for a month and pay down this technical debt and perform a large migration. And I think there's a lot of developers that are in similar situations where they are time or money restricted in terms of tackling this upgrade. And NgUpgrade makes it affordable, I guess would be a good way of saying it, where I can sort of spread this out over time, and I can start to introduce better ways of building applications incrementally into my app without having to pay for it all up front.
Yep. Yeah, you can tackle the technical debt that comes into upgrading as the way you tackle all the rest of your technical debt, which is, as I get to it, I can do it.
That's right. And it's funny because these two projects that I'm interested in, which was NgUpgrade and NgRx, they actually really go hand in hand, because NgRx was a way for us to write state management in one framework, Angular, and then using NgUpgrade, we can share that state back into our legacy half of the application. And so NgRx was also part of this way to upgrade big software.
Gotcha. So are you still a maintainer on both of those projects, or have you moved on to something else?
So I don't work on the NgUpgrade story anymore. I think it's a pretty fleshed out story, and if you need to start upgrading, go for it. But I'm still very actively involved in NgRx.
Cool. So what are you working on now?
So right now, well, first, we are about to give mini talks at NgConf. So my co-contributor, Brandon Roberts, who I also work with at Synapse, him and I are giving 4 talks at NgConf, all about NgRx. There's an entire NgRx track day that we're helping speakers put together slides for. So for the next 2 months, or however many months until NgConf, we're going to be focusing on that.
Mm-hmm.
But then afterwards, we have some really big plans for how we're going to evolve NgRx to be more than just state management.
What do you mean? What else is it going to do?
So in Angular 6, there is a new renderer called Ivy.
Right.
And if you're going to be building Angular apps, it's not going to be much to you in Angular 6. But what it does is Ivy is going to expose a lot more of how Angular works to builders of tools like NgRx, and really give us the ability to do what I would call meta programming on top of Angular, which is something that hasn't existed in the framework up until this point, which is to say, we'll actually be able to tap into the way components are created and compiled. We'll be able to change the way you wire up dependency injection without actually having to contribute these ideas back to Angular core.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really high-level way of saying NgRx will be in a position to make reactive Angular more appealing for developers. There's a lot of ways that developers have asked for more reactive primitives inside the framework itself, like how do I do forms in a more reactive way?
Right.
Or how do I write components in a more reactive way? And what Ivy is going to let NgRx do is we'll be able to write these kinds of libraries that enable developers to do just that. And so we're really excited about what this means for NgRx and developers who are interested in reactive Angular.
Makes sense. That's exciting. We'll have to have you back on the show to talk about it.
Definitely. As soon as we finish wrapping our head around all of these crazy ideas that it unlocks.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. Well, before we do picks, do you have a blog or Twitter or anything else where people can come and see what you're thinking about or working on now?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to follow what I'm doing with NgRx. So I'd either follow me on Twitter at MikeRyanDev, or we sometimes post blog posts to the NgRx editor. So that's medium.com/@NgRx. And you'll find release announcements there, along with content about, how do you actually build applications, some real deep dive style articles about NgRx.
That's great. All right, folks, you heard it right here. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up then, and we'll get to some picks. Do you have some things you want to shout out about?
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Yes, I've got 3 picks. So my first pick, I'm going to keep on the NgRx theme and go with NgRx Data, which is a library by John Papa and Ward Bell, who I know come on the shows from time to time. And what they've done is they've tried to figure out a way to make the development cycle with NgRx faster up front.
Right.
So one of the flaws with NgRx is if you're starting a new project with it, you have to write a ton of code to get started. And that makes it difficult to prototype and move quickly with the framework. NgRx Data lets you skip all of that. It will wire up all of your entity management to your backend for you. And so you can focus on building your application without having to worry about the NgRx part of it. And then when you're ready to do more involved NgRx, you can start to break out of their library incrementally. So it's a really great way to start writing less code up front and move quickly.
Nice.
My second pick is for Cypress.io at Synapse. Because we do industrial IoT, quality is in everything we do. We have to write a lot of tests at all levels, from unit to integration to end-to-end.
Mm-hmm.
And Cypress.io is a really high-quality browser automation testing tool. So we use it to write end-to-end tests. And I think what's so great about it is you write your tests with the browser live, and you can see as you change tests how the browser responds to it. And it provides a really great development experience if you're trying to write end-to-end tests. And then my final pick is Sea of Thieves. It's a new game that came out just now. You can be a pirate with 3 of your closest friends. It's a great way to decompress, write some code in the day, go out and be a pirate in the night, have fun with it. Really great game, and we're really, really enjoying it.
What's it called again?
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves. Awesome. I've got a couple of picks that I'm going to throw out as well. One of them is just being involved in the political system. I mentioned to Mike before the show that last night was I had a little bit of a surprising experience. I went out to the local Republican caucus. If you want to be involved in politics in Utah and have any kind of say, you have to register as a Republican and show up to the caucus. Because by the time the candidates are nominated or go through a primary, they're pretty much guaranteed to win here. Not everywhere and not all of them, but a lot of them. And so if you want to have a say, you have to go to the caucus meeting and send delegates to the convention who are going to vote for candidates that you're going to want to see show up. And so, I go out and I vote, and I went and I was thinking, you know what, I don't know if I really have time to be a delegate, but, I'm going to go and I'm going to, vote for people who believe what I believe. And one of my neighbors nominated me to be the precinct chair. And I wasn't smart enough to say no. And so when the election, when we elected the precinct chair, I wound up being elected. And now I'm really looking into, okay, how does the system work, and who are the candidates, and, what's going on. And so whatever party, whatever level, whatever jurisdiction you live in, I just encourage people to go get involved. I mean, even if it is just to show up, find out who else is there, find out what principles they're going to vote on, and then go vote on it. Or, if you want to get more involved in your political party or system. But, I hear a lot of people complain about it, at least in the United States, what's going on in Washington, D.C. And really showing up to vote is kind of the minimum that you need to do if you really care. You need to go find out how these people are voting and what they're doing, and whether or not what they're doing represents your views. And then you have to help make that change. Because if you're not going to do it, if you're not willing to make that, go do that work, then we're going to keep sending the same people back who are causing our problems. And so I'm encouraging people to go out. I know it's probably a little bit late, depending on, when your area does your political caucusing or primaries or whatever. It's not too late for everybody, though. So get involved, find out what's going on, and then figure out if a change needs to be made, and then make it. And then the other pick that I have, I get together with a group of guys and play board games at least once a month. And I just bought a new game that I'm pretty excited. We're going to be playing it tonight, myself and a couple of guys. We're playing Risk Legacy. Now, I kind of grew up playing Risk. Risk Legacy, I've also played Pandemic Legacy. It's like the original game, except each round you play, you make changes to the game. So, you basically upgrade parts of the board, you put stickers on the board, you tear up cards. I mean, if you're used to really taking care of your games, it might drive you a little bit crazy, because it's like, throw the other card away. But, and you can only play through it one time. But it's been really, really fun. I've played Pandemic Legacy once, and we're playing through it again with some other friends. And I'm really looking forward to Risk Legacy and seeing how that goes. So I'm going to pick that as well. All right, Mike, thanks for coming and talking to us. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate all the work that you put in just for helping people do that state management and kind of keep track of all of the things that are moving in their app when it gets a little bit complicated.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and talking about it.
All right, well, we'll see you at NgConf, and we'll get you on the show after that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.